Hello, everybody. This is Frank. It's Tuesday, 12. Oh, no, Tuesday, July 21st, almost 5 o'clock. And we've been away for a day or two. Sorry about that. There's a lot going on in the world. We are going to leave the details as to the voting logs in the United States and a number of other discoveries to people better suited to it than ourselves. And we're going to talk for a minute about what has occurred recently in Jordan. And what people have asked us, which is, and comes into a basic stance, which is Iran fighting their war online? We're going to talk about social media, open source intelligence, and the new battle space that is existing in this conflict. First time we've really had this. So when people are telling you stuff and comparing it to the Afghan and the Iraq war, it's a whole different world going on out there right now. So don't be fooled. But gonna, fool some of the people some of the time. So as we have known, traditionally, the wars are fought on the land, sea, and in the air, right? You got the three dynamics there. But over the last 3 decades, we have been adding another highly recognizable domain, which is cyberspace. And there we see there is an additional battlefield that requires far less attention. I'm sorry, requires more attention, receives far less attention than it needs, and that is the internet itself. Every smartphone, every social media account, every bot, every security camera, television report, government statement can contribute to a continuously updated intelligence picture. Unlike traditional espionage, much of this interference and information does not need to be stolen. It is volunteered. And that raises an intriguing question during the current conflict involving Iran and the United States, which is Iran using the internet itself as an intelligence collection platform? The answer may be more important than many people appreciate. Military organizations once relied primarily upon classified sources to understand the battlefield. You have your satellites, reconnaissance aircraft, intercepted communications, human intelligence networks, you had special operations. Those capabilities remain essential, but modern analysts increasingly recognize another valuable resource, which is the open source intelligence, commonly known as OSINT, if you have to have one more abbreviation in your life. And that includes commercial satellite imagery and the cell phone videos, the traffic cameras, all the channels, Telegram, TikTok, Instagram, blah, 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 even OnlyFans probably, Facebook, and local television and government press releases. Each individual item may appear insignificant. A shaky phone video of an explosion may seem to reveal almost nothing. But, we can always add a but. A local television interview with a witness may appear to be ordinary news coverage, but when hundreds of these fragments are collected, compared, geolocated, and placed into chronological order, they can produce a remarkably detailed operational picture. And Western analysts have already demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach during the war in Ukraine. Independent researchers have identified military formations, reconstructed missile attacks, geolocated destroyed equipment, and followed troop movements using little more than publicly available images and mapping tools. There is no reason to assume that America's adversaries have ignored these developments. Consider what's happened immediately after a missile strike, okay? Within minutes, residents are uploading videos, even during the attack sometimes. Instead of doing the sensible thing and getting away from the missile, they turn their cameras on. Local journalists report the explosions, emergency vehicles, blah, 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 smoke, fire, screaming, all this shit's going on. Official statements acknowledge that an incident has occurred. To the average citizen, this is simply breaking news. To a trained intelligence analyst, it may also be battle damage assessment. Every image can contain useful information. Direction of the smoke, the position of the sun, believe it or not, the time of the recording, the weather conditions, visible landmarks, things of that nature. One video may reveal very little, but as you continue to watch and more videos come on, several videos taken from different vantage points, different locations, may allow analysts to triangulate the approximate impact area. When these observations are combined with commercial satellite imagery, mapping software, even Google Earth to some extent, and publicly available information about the facility, an adversary may be able to estimate where a missile landed and whether it produced a useful result. No spies are required to do that. No classified network, no three-letter agencies are out there needing to do that to penetrate anything. The information may be already online. And that's where we're going to talk about the Jordan attack from the other day, which killed the three Americans, actually. Two identified, one unidentified. Recent missile attacks involving the American installation at Mawafq. No, am I saying that right? Mawafaq, we'll say, Salti Air Base in Jordan illustrate the possibility. Public recording indicates that the installation was attacked more than once over a relatively short period. So you have videos, you have eyewitness accounts, media reports, and subsequently appeared online. Some commentators have argued that the fatal strike proves Iran possesses precise intelligence concerning American air defenses and intentionally exploited a specific defensive weakness. We can talk about that for a minute, perhaps. That hypothesis cannot be laughed out of court anytime soon, unfortunately, but it also cannot be established from the publicly available evidence. Civilian analysts may not be given or may not have been given the missile's launch position, the complete flight path, the altitude profile, the approach direction, the intercept records, things of that nature, which would tell you what's going on. The reason I say this is not a lot of people, but a number of the anti-American crowd, which is getting bigger. The premise of their story is that the Iranians hit a Patriot missile battery, and by knocking that out of commission, the Americans were not reacting to the idea that there was some kind of pathway that opened up. The Iranians knew about it and launched the additional missile through the open, unobstructed pathway and hit the barracks. Now I'll call that the Death Star gambit because that's the probability level is very, very low, but it could still happen because, hey, where's the Death Star today, right? Because that is assuming, A, that you knew the entirety of the Jordanians' anti-missile defense network. And you knew this one little air shaft was uncovered. And you know the story of of what happens to the Death Star. So if I get rid of that Patriot missile battery, I have free range to fire missiles into the base. Maybe on a Bayesian scale, maybe 10%, maybe 7%. You're giving the Iranians a lot of credit considering what we're pretty sure they have left on their targeting equipment and acquisition, but that's where this is all coming in. Could it have been done? Yes. Was that what probably happened? Probably not. Does it make a better story and make the Iranians sound like they're harder to beat and that they're really, really smart and we're really, really stupid? Yeah. Until you listen to what we just said, which is you would have had to know all that. You would have had to have a missile accurate enough to nick that Patriot missile battery. You had to know that the command structure inside of the base was lackadaisical and was not going to immediately fix or whatever that particular missile system. You had to know that there were no other counter missile systems between there and whatever the point of origin of the missile was, where usually you interlock, okay, your missile defense systems. It's a shame stories like this get traction, but you know what? Call of Duty, I guess it's Call of Duty syndrome, right? If we can do it in Call of Duty, we can do it in the real world. Did it happen? Possibly. Like I'm telling you, I can give you, if you want, we'll work the math out from the Baines program and give it to you. But it'll be between maybe 7 and 10%. The chance probably was something like reconnaissance by fire. They kept throwing missiles out and eventually they hit something and then he did. Because the thing is, after they killed the American service people, they didn't drop another missile on the base, from what we understand. So it's like you would think the Iranians would want to really rack the body count up because it would allow pressure to go on to the US administration. Whereas instead, they did, I guess you could say they didn't have to. Killing 2 to 3 Americans allowed Congress and all the people on television to blame the president personally for what would basically be, I guess, a colonel, maybe, who would have been in charge of that position. Granted, as the president, you are responsible for everything that goes on under you. However, in this situation, I would say that's pretty much they got a lucky shot. It was a lucky shot. That's what I'm going to say. But the thing is, when we go back and we looked at this, if they'd known, we could have made that shot happen if they had known through a lot of programs that are readily available to you, the consumer. And that should worry people a lot, you know, because as you've seen, the United States, which has spent a lot of money, that'll be the other thing, that we've spent more money per day than we did in the other wars, but we've spent more money per day in this war because it all goes into killing. When you looked at the summary of money per day for Afghanistan and Iraq, it was less. But we also had massive amounts of troops and massive amounts of casualties and massive amounts of theft. Where in this particular battle, it's the cost of missiles and bombs, avgas, things like that. It sounds kind of machinery type person or non-feeling to say that. It's costing more to kill them than it would have if we had invaded, basically, is what they don't want to say. By us not wanting to invade, by us not wanting to kill all their people, it has cost us more money. So there's your war, part of your war tax scenario, which we've discussed and we'll discuss again in the future. So that's basically what that whole discussion was about. So civilian analysts, which would be, I guess, us to some extent, and the other ones that spend more money on this, and really are some of them are really starting to lose that. I have lost a lot of respect for a lot of the guys that, especially on the YouTube, because I know from a person we dealt with on Rumble and went on YouTube that there's a lot of arm twisting to not give you a good story over there. But that's just how it is. It's not my thing. The people that are actually living, making a dollar to survive, which is sad, on the stuff that they do online, they're problematic because they are easily influenced, right? I mean, look what you got with that Candace Owens person. So anyway, as we're saying with this, let's get back to this thing. The civilian analysts have not been given the missiles launch precision, like I said, all these things that you would really need to say, yes, this is happening. We don't know where that missile came from. Okay. So that whole story could just go away in a second if you found out that it's 5 different people firing 5 different missiles from 5 different places because the avenues would all be different. You know what I'm saying? So there is another possibility that may require less sophisticated intelligence, and that would be that Iran may have conducted repeated attacks against the coordinates of a known military installation, which I think is what they're doing now, while using publicly available reporting to determine what happened after each attempt. So they're letting the news do their bomb damage assessment for them. Okay. They have a pretty good idea that at whatever these coordinates is a Jordanian base. So they set their clock or whatever you want to say, their gyroscope, and they throw that baby up in the air and it lands somewhere around there. These ballistic missiles, if it's the ones they think they are very similar to the old German V2 rocket. So they're pretty accurate, but they're not Uncle Sam's catching you within 5 inches or 6 inches. You're not slipping a 500-pound bomb in the window like we can do. But they're getting within X amount of yards, and that's going to be another situation. Did they even intentionally target the quarters? Were they trying to blow something else up? They're usually out there for infrastructure. They're usually out there for like Kuwait, the desalination plants, electric, everything that you'll hear people accuse the United States of doing, which is against the Geneva Convention, is being done by the Iranians, who are also signatories to those same documents. So laugh it up. It's a different world, okay? But the distinction matters here, like I said, because Iran would not necessarily need to possess a complete picture of the defensive network before launching their weaponry. It would instead be using the information from the internet as a feedback mechanism, which shows once again it's pretty ingenious. Although a lot of people have talked about it, we've talked about it ourselves. I know I put part of that into that book, the booklet I put together. That's in there. You can fight like a superpower as far as these type of issues just by things that are laying around online. That's why you're going to say, when I say this is an entirely different war, if this had been 20 years ago, Iran would have been gone by now. I mean, they would have tried to fight to the end. The problem we would have had 20 years ago, we probably would have had to invade them because you have to get them out of the rocks. You know, how do you get the rats out of the rocks? You got to burn them out. So hopefully this made some sense. I'm probably give a written version of most of this in the whatever that comment box is. It'll make more sense. If you have any questions, if we give you more in-depth detail on what's going on, just comment or send an email or something and we'll get back to you. All right. Sorry, I'm a little bit off on it, but there's a lot there. And like I said, it's very sad when people, especially American people who are supposed to be Americans and pretend to be, I am not a journalist. Nobody I deal with is a journalist. They're saying that they're doing that and they are glorifying the fact that American servicemen and women have been killed. And that's what's been going on for the last day and a half. So just for the almighty dollar or just for another click. So fuck them. What goes around comes around, as far as I understand. And if you want to support, the opposition, feel free, but don't go out there waving that goddamn flag around because I don't want to see it. So that's enough of that. 5:07, July 21st. Have a good day. Be safe.